From the calculated precision of Domenico Cefalu to the imprisoned yet influential Victor Amuso to the criminal mastermind Lorenzo Mannino, these criminals embody the enduring appeal of power obtained through violence, wealth accumulated through corruption, and respect earned through fear. They are the young Mafia dons still active in 2025. Let's pull back the curtain. Liborio Bellomo. Perhaps no crime boss embodies the concept of a teen mafia boss quite like Liborio Salvatore Barney Bellomo. Born January 8, 1957, into a family with deep mafia connections, Bellomo was initiated into the Genovese crime family in 1977 at the remarkably young age of 20, which means his recruitment and grooming for organized crime began during his teenage years, when most young men his age were contemplating college or entry-level jobs. What makes Bellomo's story particularly extraordinary is not just his early entry into the Mafia, but the meteoric rise that followed his initiation. The ceremony took place above an East Harlem pizzeria when he was just 20 years old, a location that perfectly encapsulates the blend of everyday business and criminal enterprise that characterizes much of organized crime. His father, Salvatore Bellomo, was a soldier in the Genovese family and was closely associated with Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, providing young Liborio with the kind of insider access that most aspiring mobsters could only dream of achieving. By his mid-20s, Bellomo had already become a captain, capo regime, overseeing a crew in the Bronx. This unprecedented advancement through the ranks speaks to both his intelligence and his family's deep connections within the organization. In 1990, when he was just 33 years old, Bellomo was identified as the acting boss by investigator Kenneth McCabe following the indictment of Vincent Chin Gigante in the Windows case. Throughout the 1990s, Bellomo's criminal activities expanded significantly into sophisticated racketeering operations. His 1996 RICO indictment included charges for labor racketeering, specifically involving his efforts to exert significant influence over labor unions, particularly those associated with the Jacob Javits Convention Center in Manhattan. As of 2024, Bellomo was recognized as the Genovese family boss, and there is no evidence suggesting a change in leadership by July 2025. But Bellomo's story of teenage recruitment pales in comparison to the desperation that drove another future crime boss to seek power through violence, Lorenzo Mannino. The story of Lorenzo Mannino represents one of the most remarkable transformations in modern organized crime, from a financially struggling teenager performing menial tasks for the mob to becoming the acting boss and official consigliere of the Gambino crime family as of 2025. Born on July 27, 1959, to Sicilian parents from Torretta, Mannino's entry into the world of organized crime began during his teenage years in the mid-1970s, when economic necessity drove him to seek income from the very organization that would eventually come to define his entire adult life. His father worked as a bus driver, and his mother stayed at home, leaving the family in a precarious economic situation. It was during these formative years that young Lorenzo began performing small tasks for the Gambino crime family, starting with something as seemingly innocuous as collecting debts for higher-ranking members. By the 1980s and 1990s, Mannino had become deeply involved in the family's more serious criminal enterprises, culminating in his 1993 federal trial alongside John Gambino, Joseph Gambino, and Matteo Romano. The charges in this case were extensive and serious: racketeering, drug trafficking, murder, extortion, loan sharking, bribery, and illegal gambling, demonstrating the broad scope of criminal activities in which he had become involved. In 1994, Mannino pleaded guilty to drug trafficking and conspiring to murder Francesco Oliveri, resulting in a 15-year prison sentence and a $25,000 fine. He was reportedly made inducted as a full member shortly after his release and may have taken over John Gambino's crew, though this transition remains somewhat unclear due to the secretive nature of such organizational changes within criminal families. While Mannino's rise from poverty to power is remarkable, it's nothing compared to the shocking resilience of a boss who has turned multiple prison sentences into stepping stones to greater criminal authority. Michael Mancuso. The criminal career of Domenico Michael Mancuso, known throughout the organized crime world as Mickey Nose or the Nose, represents a masterclass in resilience and adaptation within the treacherous landscape of modern organized crime. Born July 18, 1955. Mancuso began his criminal career in the early 1980s as an associate of the East Harlem Purple Gang, a notorious group involved in drug trafficking and other crimes that served as a feeder organization for the more established Mafia families. His criminal history includes a 1984 conviction for manslaughter after he fatally shot his wife, Evelina, and left her body on a bench in front of Jacobi Hospital in the Bronx. This early violent crime, for which he served a 10-year sentence, established a pattern of brutality that would characterize much of his subsequent criminal career and demonstrated his willingness to use extreme violence even against family members. The transition from street-level criminal to family boss was neither immediate nor without significant obstacles and periods of imprisonment. In May 2005, former Bonanno boss Joseph Massino implicated Mancuso in the 1999 murder of Gerlando Sciascia, a high-ranking family member whose killing was part of the internal power struggles that have periodically convulsed the Bonanno organization. After acting boss Vincent Basciano was imprisoned, Mancuso became the acting boss of the Bonanno family in November 2004. During this period, he ordered the murder of Randolph Pizzolo, which occurred on November 30, 2004, further cementing his reputation for violence. This killing would later become the centerpiece of federal charges against Mancuso, resulting in his arrest on February 16, 2006, and eventual conviction. He pleaded guilty on August 6, 2008, and was sentenced to 15 years in prison on December 16, 2008. Perhaps most remarkably, in June 2013, while still incarcerated, Mancuso was named the official boss of the Bonanno family, a rare occurrence in Mafia history that speaks to both his influence within the organization and the family's desperate need for stable leadership during a period of intense law enforcement pressure. Managing a criminal organization from prison requires a sophisticated network of intermediaries and communication methods, all while avoiding detection by prison authorities and federal investigators who monitor such activities. Mancuso was released on March 12, 2019, after serving his sentence for the Pizzolo murder, but his freedom was short-lived due to continuing legal challenges. On March 9, 2022, he was arrested for violating the terms of his supervised release by associating with organized crime members, including attending a dinner where Mafia business was discussed. He was sentenced to 11 months in prison on July 28, 2023, and released on July 28, 2024. What happened next perfectly encapsulates Mancuso's approach to organized crime leadership: immediate re-engagement with family operations despite the obvious risks and potential consequences. By January 21, 2025, Mancuso was seen at a BBQ with alleged Bonanno soldier Frankie Boy Salerno, indicating his immediate return to Mafia activities and his unwillingness to let legal restrictions interfere with his leadership responsibilities. Yet even Mancuso's defiant resilience seems modest when compared to the terrifying legacy of a boss whose teenage recruitment led to one of the bloodiest reigns in Mafia history. Vittorio Amuso. Vittorio Little Vic Amuso presents perhaps the most extreme example of how teenage recruitment into organized crime can lead to a lifetime of violence and criminal leadership that spans decades of unprecedented brutality. Born November 4, 1934 in Brooklyn, New York, Amuso became involved in organized crime during the 1950s while still a teenager, working initially as an enforcer for Joseph Crazy Joe Gallo, a prominent figure in what was then known as the Profaci family, later the Colombo family. During the early 1960s, while still in his 20s but having been recruited as a teenager, Amuso participated in the internal conflict within the Colombo family, where Gallo and his faction rebelled against boss Giuseppe Joe Profaci over profit disputes. Following Gallo's murder in 1972, Amuso transitioned to the Lucchese crime family, where he quickly rose through the ranks due to his established reputation for ruthlessness and his proven loyalty to criminal organizations. Amuso's ascent within the Lucchese family culminated in 1987, when he became boss following the imprisonment of Anthony "Tony Ducks" Corallo during the Mafia Commission trial. Alongside his close ally and underboss Anthony "Gaspeep" Casso, Amuso consolidated power through a combination of strategic alliances and brutal violence that earned him the nickname the Deadly Don. Between 1986 and 1990, he ordered or was involved in at least 9 murders, targeting rivals, suspected informants, and even members of his own family to maintain control and eliminate perceived threats. Amuso was a central figure in the Windows case, a massive bid-rigging scheme that controlled 75% of $191 million in window installation contracts in New York City. Perhaps most infamously, in a dispute with Anthony Axaturo, head of the Lucchese family's New Jersey faction, Amuso ordered the elimination of the entire Jersey crew after Axaturo refused to send half of their profits to New York. Following his indictment in the Windows case on May 30, 1990, Amuso went into hiding but was captured on July 29, 1991, at a mall outside outside Scranton, Pennsylvania. On June 15, 1991, he was convicted on all 54 counts of a federal indictment, including 9 murders, racketeering, extortion, and fraud, and was sentenced to life in prison without parole on October 9, 1992. On April 11, 2025, 39 members and associates of the Lucchese family's New Jersey faction were charged with racketeering, gambling offenses, money laundering, and other crimes, indicating that the family remains active and profitable under Amuso's overarching authority despite his incarceration. In 2023, Amuso, then 88, sought compassionate release under the First Step Act of 2018, citing chronic arthritis, vision loss, and severe pain. His request was denied by a federal judge who cited his extensive criminal history, including ordering 9 murders and 3 attempted killings. But if Amuso's story shocks with its American brutality, the next tale will chill you with its European sophistication, a boss whose environmental crimes have poisoned entire regions. Francesco Bidonetti. Born January 21, 1951 in Casal di Principe, Italy, Bidonetti became known by his nickname Cicciotto e Mezzanotte, Midnight Frankie, and his rise within the Casalesi clan of the Camorra began during his youth in the environmentally and economically devastated regions of southern Italy, where criminal organizations often provide the only viable path to economic advancement for young men. Bidonetti serves as the chief lieutenant to Francesco Schiavone, the boss of the Casalesi clan, and leads the Bidonetti clan, one of 5 clans within the Casalesi. One of the most significant and environmentally destructive aspects of Bidonetti's criminal career has been his oversight of the Casalesi clan's waste disposal operations, which represent perhaps the most devastating example of organized crime's impact on the environment. The clan operates several illegal dumps between Naples and Caserta, handling tons of dangerous waste from northern and central Italy, as well as toxic waste from factories, hospitals, and cemeteries. In December 2012, the Anti-Mafia Investigation Directorate, DIA, in Naples, issued a custody order against Bidonetti for environmental disaster, highlighting his direct responsibility for these operations and the legal system's recognition of the massive scale of environmental damage caused by his criminal activities. In October 1993, Bidonetti ordered the killing of medical doctor Gennaro Falco, who was blamed for failing to diagnose cancer in Bidonetti's first wife, Teresa Tamburino. His son, Raphael, was later accused of carrying out the murder. In December 1980, Bidonetti escaped an ambush but used Filomena Morlando, a teacher, as a human shield, resulting in her death. Bidonetti's wife, Anna Carino, was arrested in November 2007 and became a pentito, collaborator with the police, providing information that led to the arrest of 52 Casalesi members in April 2008, including Bidonetti's son, Raphael. Her collaboration resulted in a £1 million contract on her life, and in June 2008, hitmen disguised as police officers wounded her niece in Villarica, likely targeting her mother, Carino's sister. Perhaps the most significant legal battle involving Bidonetti in recent years has centered on threats he made against journalists and prosecutors who exposed his criminal activities. During the Spartacus Maxi trial in 2008, a significant legal proceeding against the Casalesi clan, Bidonetti, through his lawyer Michele Santonastasso, issued public threats against journalists Roberto Saviano and Rosaria Capacchione. These threats were part of a proclamation read in court, accusing the journalists and prosecutor Antonio Cantone of undue influence through their reporting and investigations. On July 14, 2025, the Rome Court of Appeal upheld this verdict, sentencing Bidonetti to an additional 1.5 years and Santonastasso to 1 year and 2 months. However, Bidonetti's environmental terrorism pales in comparison to the quiet cunning of a Sicilian traditionalist who has spent decades perfecting the art of invisible leadership. Domenico Cefalu. Domenico, Italian Dom Cefalu's career represents a fascinating study in how old-world Sicilian mafia traditions have been transplanted to American soil and adapted to survive in the modern era of organized crime. Born in 1947 in Palermo, Sicily, Cefalu immigrated to the United States and settled in Brooklyn, New York, where he became involved in organized crime and eventually joined the Gambino crime family. Cefalu was formally inducted as a made man by then-boss John Gotti in 1990, solidifying his status within the family at a time when Gotti's flamboyant leadership style was attracting unprecedented media attention and law enforcement scrutiny. This induction came after years of proving his loyalty and capabilities within the organization, particularly through his work with the Sicilian faction that operated primarily in Queens and Brooklyn under the leadership of Captain Pasquale Conte. Cefalu's criminal record includes significant convictions spanning several decades, beginning with a 1982 conviction for heroin smuggling alongside 10 other men, including his uncle and cousin. This early involvement in drug trafficking established his role within the Gambino family's illicit operations and demonstrated his commitment to the organization's most profitable but also most dangerous criminal enterprises. He served 6 years in prison for this conviction, and his adherence to the Mafia's code of silence during his incarceration likely contributed to his later rise within the organization. In 1992, Cefalu was summoned by a New York grand jury to testify in an investigation of his crew leader, Pasquale Conti. After answering a few questions, he refused to provide further testimony, resulting in a civil contempt charge and an 18-month prison sentence. In 1994, he was indicted again for criminal contempt for refusing to testify at Conti's trial, leading to a 33-month sentence in 1996. These incidents underscore Cefalu's unwavering loyalty to the Gambino family and his adherence to the Mafia's Omerta code of silence, even when facing significant personal consequences. As part of Operation Old Bridge in 2008, Cefalu was implicated in a racketeering conspiracy involving extortion in the trucking industry. The operation targeted the Gambino family's efforts to control construction-related businesses, including projects like the proposed NASCAR racetrack in Staten Island. Cefalu pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy and extortion, receiving a 2-year sentence and being released on November 3, 2009. Cefalu assumed leadership of the Gambino crime family in July 2011, following a period of instability caused by the imprisonment and death of John Gotti and his successors. Cefalu maintains a low profile, reportedly living with his mother in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and working for a bakery supply company to maintain a legitimate front. As of January 2025, Cefalu is reported to be the official boss of the Gambino crime family, according to Mafia journalist Jerry Capici's Gangland News. However, there is some uncertainty about his exact role, as earlier reports from 2015 suggested he may have stepped down, with Frank Cali taking over until Cali's murder in 2019. More recent sources indicate that Lorenzo Mannino may serve as the acting or street boss, handling day-to-day operations, while Cefalu remains the official leader. But if Cefalu's invisibility has kept him free, another boss has mastered the art of operating in plain sight while wielding enormous power from the shadows. Michael Ragusa. Michael "Mickey" Ragusa exemplifies the secretive, disciplined approach that has made the Genovese crime family the most enduring and arguably most powerful of New York's 5 families. Born June 22, 1965, and hailing from Pleasantville, New York, Ragusa has been a longtime member of the Genovese crime family, specifically associated with the Harlem Bronx Crew, one of the family's most influential factions. He is described as a confidant of Liborio Bellomo, the official boss of the Genovese family, and his promotion to street boss represents recognition of both his loyalty and his operational capabilities. In January 2002, Ragusa was indicted alongside high-ranking Genovese family members, including acting boss Ernest Muscarella, Capo Charles Tuso, members Liborio Bellomo, Thomas Cafaro, Pasquale Falsetti, and associate Andrew Gigante. The charges centered on racketeering and the infiltration of the International Longshoremen's Association, ILA, a labor union controlling East Coast docks, including those in New York, New Jersey, and the Port of Miami. This case was particularly significant because it highlighted the Genovese family's sophisticated methods of infiltrating legitimate industries and extracting profits through a combination of corruption, extortion, and fraud that generated millions in illegal revenue over many years. Ragusa was specifically accused of holding a sham no-show job at Metro, a trade group used as a front for mob influence on the waterfront. The indictment alleged that the Genovese family exercised criminal control over ILA locals and businesses through extortion, fraud, and money laundering. Ragusa and his co-defendants pleaded guilty to violating the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, on April 7, 2003, though specific sentencing details for Ragusa are not publicly detailed in available sources. A 2024 Reddit post and a 2023 source confirm Ragusa's ongoing role as street boss, with no indication of a change in status by 2025. Yet even Ragusa's masterful invisibility seems almost reckless compared to the calculated survival instincts of a boss who has navigated one of the Mafia's most violent family wars. Robert Donofrio. Little Robert Donofrio's career exemplifies how teenage induction into organized crime can lead to decades of criminal leadership and eventual rise to the top of one of America's most volatile crime families. Donofrio was formally inducted into the Colombo crime family in 1988 by acting boss Victor Orena, with the approval of the imprisoned official boss Carmine Persico, marking his official entry into the organized crime hierarchy at a time when he was still relatively young and setting the stage for his later prominence within the organization. During the third Colombo Colombo Family War, 1991 to 1993, a violent internal conflict between the Orena and Persico factions, Donofrio initially aligned with the Orena faction, but in 1991 switched allegiance to the Persico faction and joined the crew of Pasquale Amato. This switch in allegiance proved to be both personally beneficial and organizationally significant, demonstrating Donofrio's political acumen and his ability to read the changing dynamics within the family. Between June 1991 and July 1992, Donofrio participated in attempts to murder Orena faction members, including William Cutolo, Joseph Scopo, Thomas Patrizio, Vincent DiMartino, and Gabriel Siana. All attempts were unsuccessful, but his involvement in these conspiracy charges demonstrates the level of violence and commitment expected of family members during this turbulent period. Donofrio was arrested in the aftermath of the Third Colombo Family War and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder in 1993. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison and released on July 14, 2000, completing supervised release in 2003. In late 2010, Donofrio was recorded on a wiretap discussing efforts to extort the Gambino crime family to cover medical expenses for Colombo associate Walter Samperi, who had been stabbed by a Gambino associate in 2008. Donofrio was identified as the acting boss of the Colombo crime family in July 2023, following the death of Andrew Russo in April 2022. This appointment represented a significant elevation for someone who had previously operated at lower levels within the family hierarchy, but his long tenure and proven loyalty made him a logical choice for the position. He is believed to be holding this position until Theodore Skinny Teddy Persico Jr. is released from prison on December 29, 2025. But Donofrio's political cunning appears almost amateur when measured against the explosive violence and unwavering loyalty of our next subject, John Spirito Sr. Johnny Joe Spirito Sr.'s career demonstrates how violent histories can lead to senior organized crime leadership positions that persist well into the modern era. At 66 years old in 2025, he serves as the underboss of the Bonanno crime family, holding a senior leadership role that places him second only to the family's boss, Michael Mikey Nose Mancuso, in the organizational hierarchy. While Spirito's exact age of recruitment into organized crime isn't definitively documented, his long-standing membership in the Bonanno family and his current senior position suggest a criminal career that began during his young adult years, possibly in his 20s during the 1970s or early 1980s. Spirito's most significant documented criminal act was his involvement in the 1999 murder of Bonanno capo Gerlando, George from Canada Sciascia. Sciascia, a Sicilian-born member of the family, was killed in a hit ordered by then-boss Joseph Massino as part of the internal power struggles that have periodically convulsed the Bonanno organization. Spirito, along with Capo Patrick Patty from the Bronx Di Filippo, admitted their guilt in the homicide, demonstrating the violent resolution of disputes that often characterizes organized crime leadership transitions and internal conflicts. In August 2016, Spirito was named in a massive indictment by the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office, which charged 46 individuals, including members of the Genovese, Gambino, Lucchese, and Bonanno crime families, with racketeering and related offenses. Following his release in 2020, Spirito has been under scrutiny for potential violations of his supervised release conditions. One of the most controversial and disputed events in Spirito's recent criminal career occurred on May 25, 2025, when a Bonanno family social club in the Bronx was reportedly robbed by 4 masked assailants, with Spirito and acting consigliere Ernest the Pitbull Aiello present during the incident. The robbers allegedly stole cash and jewelry valued at over $100,000, including money intended as tribute for boss Michael Mancuso. However, a June 2025 article from Cosa Nostra News cites Bonanno-linked sources who claim the robbery never happened, describing it as a complete bullshit story. A February 2025 Reddit post notes that Spirito and consigliere Anthony Indelicato have been instrumental in righting the ship for the Bonanno family, resolving internal conflicts and improving its reputation among other New York crime families. Finally, we come to perhaps the most chilling story of all, a boss whose unwavering loyalty to a psychopathic leader has kept him in power for decades. Michael DeSantis. Michael Big Mike DeSantis represents the enduring influence of loyalty and violence within American organized crime, demonstrating how teenage recruitment and unwavering dedication to criminal organizations can lead to decades of criminal leadership that persists well into the modern era. Born in Brooklyn, New York, DeSantis is approximately 71 years old as of late 2024, and his involvement with the Lucchese crime family began during his young adult years, facilitated by his friendship with Victor Amuso, who would later become the family's boss and one of the most most violent crime leaders in American history. DeSantis joined the Lucchese crime family in November 1989, at a time when the organization was entering one of the most violent and turbulent periods in its history under Amuso's increasingly paranoid and brutal leadership. DeSantis's most significant documented criminal activities occurred in the late 1980s and early 1990s, beginning with his participation in the murder of John Morrissey. Morrissey was a business agent for Local 580 of the Ornamental Ironworkers Union, who was involved in a window replacement scheme that defrauded the New York City Housing Authority of millions of dollars. On September 18, 1991, DeSantis was involved in a failed assassination attempt on Alphonse Darco, a high-ranking Lucchese member, at the Kimberly Hotel in Manhattan. In April 1993, DeSantis was arrested and sentenced to 18 years in prison for committing 2 murders at Amuso's behest. In May 2014, the FBI observed a sit-down on Long Island involving DeSantis, Capo John Castellucci, and others, discussing an unspecified illegal criminal activity, indicating his continued involvement in the family's operations post-release, and demonstrating the ongoing challenge faced by organized crime figures attempting to rebuild their criminal careers while under federal supervision and surveillance. In 2017, Victor Amuso, serving a life sentence, sent a coded letter to underboss Stephen Crea, designating DeSantis as the new acting boss to replace Matthew Madonna. As of 2025, DeSantis is believed to remain the acting boss of the Lucchese crime family, overseeing the family's 7 crews operating in the Bronx, Long Island, Manhattan, New Jersey, and Brooklyn, now based in Staten Island. If you enjoyed watching this video, then go ahead and click on any of the cards on your screen for more.